Today, we're diving into the stories of two ancient prophets who had wildly different missions, but really one powerful underlying purpose. On one hand, you've got a reluctant missionary who was sent to his sworn enemies. On the other, a shepherd who went toe-to-toe with the wealthy and corrupt. And even though their stories are thousands of years old, their messages about mercy and justice, well, they feel like they could have been written yesterday.
I mean, come on, it sounds like the tagline for a blockbuster movie, right? But this was the actual reality for the prophet Amos. Here's this total outsider, a simple shepherd, who gets a call to go and confront a society that was literally drowning in luxury, a luxury built on the backs of the poor. It is an incredible story of courage, and it's a call for social justice that has just echoed down the centuries.
Okay, so before we really get into their individual stories, we've got to get one thing straight about what a prophet actually was. Forget the whole crystal ball, vague predictions thing. In the ancient world, a prophet's job was to be a truth teller, a professional status quo disruptor, and, more often than not, a very, very unwelcome voice of conscience.
This quote from the scholar Abraham Heschel just hits the nail on the head. Prophets were not trying to win any popularity contests, that's for sure. Their whole purpose was to point out society's blind spots, to challenge corrupt leaders, and to shout about injustice wherever they saw it. People often thought they were unpatriotic, even dangerous, because they cared more about truth than about making people comfortable. They were, to put it simply, disturbing.
So, with that idea of a disturbing prophet in mind, let's turn to our first case study, Jonah. And yeah, we all know him for the giant fish, but the real heart of the story, the real drama, is this clash between God's incredibly wide-open mercy and our very human instinct to be stubborn and just run away. You know that feeling, right? That resistance to doing something hard, whether it's because of fear or prejudice or just plain old discomfort. That's Jonah. The plot is pretty simple, but it is so powerful. God calls Jonah and says, "Go to Nineveh," which, by the way, is the capital of the enemy empire. And Jonah is basically like, no thanks, and immediately gets on a boat going in the exact opposite direction. But here's the thing, you can't outrun your calling. A massive storm hits, the ship is about to fall apart, and after that whole famous episode with the fish, God just puts him right back where he started, back on mission. It's the classic tale of trying to avoid your responsibilities. This story is just packed with huge ideas. For one, it shows that God's compassion isn't just for a select few, it's for everyone, even your enemies. And of course, it perfectly captures our own tendency to run away from the hard stuff. But theologically, it's making some massive claims for its time. That the God of Israel is in charge of all of nature, the sea, the storms, the animals, and maybe most importantly, that you literally cannot escape God's presence. There's nowhere to hide. At the end of the story, the reason God gives for sparing this enemy city is summed up in this one fascinating phrase. It's not about them being actual children, it's a figure of speech. It means the entire population is just morally lost, completely ignorant of the right way to live. And for that reason, God sees them not as objects of wrath, but as objects of compassion. All right, now let's do a complete 180 and meet a very different kind of prophet. This is Amos. And let me tell you, this guy wasn't running from his mission. He was running toward the center of power, ready to confront it head on. He was a shepherd, an outdoorsman, a total outsider who delivered one of the most blistering, unforgettable critiques of social injustice you'll find anywhere. Now, to really get Amos, you have to get the geography of the time. The kingdom was split. Amos was from the southern kingdom, Judah. Think rural, kind of rugged sheep country. But God sends him north to Israel, which was the richer, more powerful, and, in Amos's eyes, way more corrupt of the two kingdoms. So you have this southerner marching into the north to tell them how to live. As you can imagine, they did not appreciate it one bit. And what did he see when he got there? A society with a wealth gap that was just staggering. Amos talks about this ultra-rich class with summer homes and winter homes, people just lounging on these fancy beds inlaid with ivory. For a shepherd who probably just wrapped himself in a cloak to sleep under the stars, this kind of obscene luxury, all funded by oppressing the poor, was absolutely horrifying. So, how does a shepherd make his case? Well, it turns out Amos was an absolute master of rhetoric. He used the tools he had, his deep knowledge of the outdoors, and some really powerful literary devices to make his message completely unforgettable. So let's take a look at his playbook. He spoke in these vivid pictures, all drawn from his life out in the fields. To him, God's coming judgment wasn't some abstract idea. It was the roar of a lion about to pounce. The nation's injustice wasn't just a mistake. It was a harvest cart groaning under the weight, overloaded and about to snap in two. He used these powerful, everyday images that everyone could understand to make his divine message impossible to ignore. He also had this powerful, repetitive formula he'd use. He would call out one of the neighboring nations and then launch into his judgment with this poetic phrase, listing off crime after crime. And he would do this for nation after nation, just building this incredible, powerful rhythm of condemnation. Now, this is really important. This isn't simple math. For 3, even for 4 was a common literary device back then. It's a way of building to a climax, a way of saying the list of crimes is just overflowing. It means crime upon crime, that the cup of their guilt is just full to the brim and spilling over. And here's what's so absolutely radical about what Amos is doing. The main sins he's condemning, they aren't religious errors. He's not mad at them for worshiping the wrong god or getting a ritual wrong. The primary charges are crimes against humanity. Brutal cruelty, deep injustice, what we would absolutely call human rights violations today. Okay, so let's step back and just ask the big question. Why are we still talking about a reluctant messenger and a shepherd from some tiny village thousands of years ago? It's because their core messages about mercy, about justice, and about what true faith looks like, they're completely timeless. You can really boil down Amos's entire fiery book to this one point. He was basically giving a real-world, detailed commentary on what it actually means to love your neighbor. For Amos, this wasn't some vague, warm feeling. No, it was about fair wages. It was about having courts that weren't biased against the poor. It was about a whole society that actively cared for its most vulnerable people. There's this powerful Hebrew idiom that gets right to the heart of this. It's the idea of the 2 eyes. To have a good eye, an ayin tova, means you're generous, you're open-handed, you're compassionate. But to have a bad eye, an ayin ra, means you're tight-fisted, you're selfish, you're just consumed with hoarding your own wealth. Amos was calling for an entire culture to shift from having a bad eye to having a good eye. Ultimately, Amos saved his sharpest critique for the hypocrites. He just railed against people who were super religious in public, going to all the festivals, making big sacrifices, but who were living these lives of private injustice. They were draining the poor to fuel their own comfort. For Amos, you just couldn't split your life up like that. True faith had to be completely integrated with a humane, compassionate, and just way of living. And that really brings us to the final lingering question. Jonah was sent to the enemy. Amos was sent to the corrupt and comfortable people within his own culture. So if a prophet showed up today with that same disturbing, unwelcome, brutal honesty, who would they be speaking to? And maybe more importantly, would any of us actually be willing to listen?